Every family prioritizes their children's health and well-being. As a foundation for growth and development, food plays a critical role in both their physical and mental health. Understanding why organic food and the avoidance of pesticides is so important, especially to children and pregnant women, is key. So let's talk about it. Hey everybody, I'm Dr. David Berger, a board-certified pediatrician in Tampa, Florida. I am focusing on making healthy kids. Now today we're going to be talking about pesticides. And when it comes especially to making healthy kids, what happens both in the preconception phase as well as during pregnancy, it's super important, as well, of course, as once a child is alive and eating their own food. Now, of course, preconception allows us to optimize the womb, the nutrition that the mom will pass along, the environment of the womb itself. And of course, during pregnancy, those chemicals can impact the growth of the development of brain and other organs. Now, why is organic food superior? Often there are higher levels of nutrients in the various foods when they're grown in organic matter. Organic fruits and vegetables can have increased levels of vitamins, minerals, other types of antioxidants as well. And of course, these are really important for physical development, cognitive function, and a robust immune system. Another advantage of organic foods is they usually taste better. I know myself, I can tell pretty much right away the difference between an organic apple. It's an often conventional produce. It kind of has a more plasticky kind of taste and feel to it. It doesn't seem just as right. But sometimes they just don't have much taste to them at all. Usually organic foods, they just do taste better as well. Now, in 2012, the American Academy of Pediatrics did a review, and it emphasized that limiting the children's exposure to pesticides, especially organophosphate insecticides, is critical, and because those chemicals can adversely affect the brain development. So that's not even just us and those in the more natural world. This is the Academy of Pediatrics talking, and this was over a decade ago. Now, I recently did a companion video specifically on pesticides. So if you go through the Dr. David MD videos, you'll see right around this time, we also have that video. So check it out. It really talks about some things in more depth about the pesticides themselves, which we're not going to get into today. When it comes to organic food and organic growing, farming methods are a big key of this. One of the things that organic farmers do is they emphasize soil health. They make sure that the soil is nutritionally dense. If there's not much nutrition, or if it's lacking in the soil, then of course produce cannot pick it up into their bodies. Or if it's grass or whatever an animal is eating, of course, if that is low in nutrition, then the same thing will happen with those animals that are being fed, and they may not be as nutritious either. Part of it also is just some of the cultivating practices that they do. For instance, avoiding pesticides. There are also natural bug repellents and certain things like ladybugs and other types of bugs. And there are even repositories where if a farmer finds a particular pest or knows that there's a particular pest in their community or on their farm, they can find a particular type of insect that will go after those pests in order to spare their produce. And of course, they can be putting other types of chemicals there as well, but the organic farmers are avoiding. And of course, the more nutritionally dense it is, again, as I said, the food, it just picks it up. Now, probably the most important thing, though, is just being free from harmful chemicals, pesticides, herbicides, fertilizers. Now, some of these chemicals are referred to as GRAS, G-R-A-S, generally regarded as safe. And that's what it's been deemed by the authorities. But children, they are more vulnerable to chemicals due to their smaller size and because their organs are still developing. So what may be okay for an older person may not be so okay for an infant or a toddler, for instance. Now, exposure to these chemicals, they have health risks. And besides developmental delays, there could be hormone disruptors. There could be, and some of them even lead to longer-term chronic diseases. Now, we want to make sure that they're also free of synthetic hormones and antibiotics. Now, those are commonly used in conventional farming. Of course, the hormones could potentially affect the hormone balance of the body. This may be why kids are going into puberty earlier these days. It's not uncommon for girls to start having breast buds developing at 8 or 9, and soon thereafter developing their first period, which again is way earlier than it was a generation or two when most of these 12, 13, 14-year-olds when that was starting. But not just are their bodies not ready for it, and they're going to start ovulating faster, which of course could make their fertility window shorter, because once a girl is out of eggs, there's no more eggs. But also, the as far as the antibiotics that are in there, the antibiotics that are in a lot of these foods can lead to antibiotic resistance, and this is especially true when it comes to livestock. If the food that is fed to livestock, it has things in it, but also they're given antibiotics in order to make them more hardy and lower infections, then where's that going to get to? It's going to get into the food supply. So these things accumulate over time, and so the younger that a child is exposed, besides the fact that their bodies are not as prepared for it, it's there longer. Now, there are things that we can be doing that can make it better for our communities as a whole, and not just directly the food that we are eating, but things such as spraying of pesticides that could put chemicals into the air, into the waterway. And of course, pesticides, if they leach into it once they're on the soil, and then there's rain, and then there can be runoff into things such as lakes or rivers, then again, the water supply can be tainted that way. Now, one of the things that we can be doing is instilling the healthy habits into our children early. Education. Education is always going to be the key to leading to success. Now, of course, a 3-year-old is not going to understand the way a 7-year-old or a 17-year-old, but certainly a young child could understand that we're choosing to eat these types of foods because they're more healthy. They're less likely to hurt us. They don't necessarily need more information than that. That's probably enough for them to say, oh, that's something that sounds important. I better follow along. Now, of course, this also sets a pattern of understanding so that they can delve deeper when they're older and maybe have a better understanding of all of these things. And of course, that can, when they become adults, and teenagers, allow them to make better decisions for themselves because they have the knowledge. Now, how do we know if food is organic? Well, first and foremost, we read signs, we read labels. Of course, in supermarkets, organic food is going to be labeled as such. It's actually a marketing tool. They would not have it on there. But of course, packages also will say that it's organic. Now, you do have to be careful because sometimes organic food could then be processed. So you still have to keep an eye on that. But really, it's not that hard to know, are you accessing organic foods or not? Now, when it comes to produce itself, because not everybody can afford or have availability to organic foods. You may have heard about a nonpartisan, non-governmental group called the Environmental Work Group, or EWG. And they have a project called the Clean 15 Dirty Dozen. Now, the Dirty Dozen are the conventional non-organic produce that has the most chemicals, the most pesticides in them because of how they're typically sprayed in order to be kept suitable for market, but also because they may absorb more, whether it's through their skin, like strawberries. They're like almost a sponge, or more likely to uptake it in their roots. So in the top 5 foods in the Dirty Dozen are strawberries, spinach, greens such as kale, collard greens, and mustard greens, grapes, and peaches. And of course, strawberries and grapes, those are probably the 2 of the most consumed by young children. So you got to be really careful, and that's where we maybe want to prioritizing to go organic. Whereas the Clean 15, of which those are the foods that they don't have as much of the pesticides and chemicals as the Dirty Dozen. The top 5, going from starting with the best, are avocados, corn, onions, pineapple, and papaya. So again, those are foods that if we can't get organic all the time, then maybe we'd be okay with some of those foods and prioritizing towards the Dirty Dozen. Now, as I mentioned, probably the biggest challenge right now is cost and availability. It does cost more, and you may not be able to get it. And also, not just availability, but because a lot of non-organic foods will have preservatives in there, that makes them to be cheaper because they'll have a longer shelf life. Because if it can stick around in a package longer, or if the produce is staying in the grocery, but it's not going bad so fast, then of course people are going to buy it, be able to keep it at home longer. So there are lots of solutions, though, things that we can do to make this better. One of them is, of course, buying in smaller amounts so that way they don't go bad and we don't need the longer shelf life. Now, granted, some of us may like to go to the supermarket once every week, 2 weeks, but maybe for fresh produce, or maybe there's a farmer's market or something else that you could stop in where you can get it more often. Now, we can, of course, be buying local and seasonal. Usually they are less expensive because they're not having to travel large distances across, especially if there's food that is not in season, because those, of course, would have to come from other climates where it is in season. But also buying locally, again, just the cost of transporting the food can make a difference as well. It's also nice to be able to support our local growers, especially when they're doing the right thing by us. So that's important. Another thing we can do in terms of non-produce for organic is to buy in bulk. Things such as rice, oatmeal, beans, they can be bought in larger quantities. And of course, usually those are cheaper when things are bought in bulk. Now, there can also be what are called community-supported agriculture. Farmers will sell shares to the public, kind of like a membership, like a subscription. And then they will once a week, or they will provide a box of produce for what they're growing for them. And so that way get as much closer farm-to-table type of food. And there's a website which is www.localharvest.org that will tell you where in your local community this can be done. And of course, we could grow our own. Now, I do not have a green thumb. In fact, I killed a cactus once. You'd think I would be able to handle that, but apparently I can't. But many of my patients do, many people that I do, they have their own gardens. And of course, then you have ultimate control over the soil, the fertilizer, chemicals or not, etc. And some of my families will even some of them will grow different crops and then they'll share it amongst themselves. Maybe 5 or 6 families will be able to, maybe you'll make these 3, you'll make these 3, etc. Next thing you know, you have 18 different produce products available for them to purchase. So this can be done. It does take more thought. It does take more time. It does take more consciousness. But in the end, it matters. It matters what our kids, what women who want to get pregnant, women who are pregnant, what they put into the body, because as the old adage says, you are what you eat. Have a nice day.